Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So now we find out. My co-host just gave me the thumbs up. Thank God I didn't forget to start the recorder until the absolute last second and managed to get him on board while he was playing gun guy while we were rolling in. So I'm going to apologize in advance to the audience. I'm going to be a massive nerd, but I do that every now and then because I think, data and experiments are interesting, and when we can apply that to gun stuff and get good results and consistent path forward to a better end product and end user experience, I think it's worth doing. And then Andrew will save the show from me by talking about something really important.
I mean, what you're talking about is important because it has to deal with, whether you run nods or not, having a higher mount for your red dot, for your scope, whatever you want to call it. It's nice because honestly, if I was never running with the PBS-14 or whatever I had in the past, I probably would have gotten a higher mount, like after I tried someone else's out or something, because I have on my AR, I have the 1.93 inch ScalarWorks mount for my Hollow Sun red dot. And that thing, with night vision running it, it's great. It comes right up. If I want to shoot passive, I can shoot passive. If I want to not shoot passive, but just, basically bring it up and, shoot with both eyes open, running, actually sighting down, like PBS-14 on my left eye, which is how I used to run it, was PBS-14 on my left eye. Right eye, I would sight down through the optic and use the optic and everything. And when the times I did it at night, my brain would superimpose and it'd be white phosphorus with a red dot superimposed over top of it. And I like doing that. And that 193 mount actually helped a ton. Now, fast forward to taking a bunch of classes that I've taken with that mount and not under nods. I think it's great, especially on a shorter rifle. Obviously, we're going to get into it, but obviously a precision rifle, you don't want that, that high for obvious reasons. But that's why, and this kind of goes over to where we were talking about, where you have the one rifle to rule them all. You really got to figure out, okay, where do I want to be at? What do I want to be? What sight? And this really runs into what sight am I running? How far the distance make my max distance and all kinds of other stuff. And that plays a factor into it if you're not building one short AR and then one long AR.
Yeah, and kind of what I've butted up against is because you and I've talked about it. I have a minimal amount of training with night vision from the time I was in the military, just because, if you're not a pilot or special ops or infantry, you're pretty much going to get the bare minimum amount of night vision training, and it's going to be basically fixed position sentry and driving, which is two things I've learned to do under night vision. So I don't have a tremendous amount of experience with them, and I've been availing myself of the tools I have, which is, a Mantis X Blackbeard, because I have the ability to run AR transition drills in my office, not costing me a dime, not costing me a range time, and I'll have to go to find a class that'll let me shoot under nods in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere to not piss off neighbors. So, that is what I have available to me right now to try to get my head wrapped around how different this is. And unlike you, I've tried exactly what you just described of having the PBS-14 on my left eye and my right eye look through the red dot, and my brain is not tolerating that. I couldn't explain to you why, but I cannot. And here's the funny part. I'm right eye dominant. I know I'm right eye dominant. I'm right eye dominant, right-handed. I am all correct. I'm right side all the way up and down. But my right eye will not communicate with my brain when my left eye is under night vision and my right eye is looking through that dot. I can't see the dot unless I shut my left eye and close the nod out. Then I can see the dot just fine. And I haven't figured out why. I don't know if it's like something I need to kind of work on and like retrain my brain. But the only thing I can figure is what's happening is that subconsciously my right eye sees all this dark and defaults to the eye that has light. This the only thing I can figure subconsciously is going on, because under normal circumstances, if I'm shooting with full light with a red dot, I shoot with both eyes open and I see the dot and I see everything else. It's like I see the world and I see this one red dot where the barrel's pointing. So like I know I can do that, but for some reason under night vision, when I have one eye in the dark and one eye not, my brain does not even want to entertain that idea.
Stupid question, but do you have your dot turned down to like the lowest setting, like the night vision setting?
I've turned it all the way up, all the way down.
And are you doing this in like pitch dark where you're with your bedroom, like the one that your office that you're in now, or have you done it like walk through your house when there's some ambient light?
Well, I mean, even in my office, which is where I'm doing a lot of this, because like this is kind of the designated training area for dry fire. Like even in here, when it's quote unquote pitch black, I've got an LED on this monitor and an LED on that monitor, and I've got the light on the terminal strip down there. Like there are several ambient light sources in here. It's not pitch black. Because I mean, call it what it is. If it was pitch black with no illuminator, you wouldn't see anything anyway. Because night vision doesn't produce. It's not superpowers. It amplifies ambient light. So like I have some ambient light in here. It's not pitch black. It might work a little better if I was in like failing light instead of no light, maybe. But it's one of those things of like, this is why I've been trying to push that, and I've been trying to figure out, like a night observation device is a wonderful tool. It's a wonderful defensive tool. It is a huge intelligence boost because I can see stuff in the dark and nobody else can. But to make the jump from that to doing basic administrative tasks and patrolling to actually being able to accurately shoot under night vision, that is a jump I'm still trying to make. And that means a certain amount of like figuring out my equipment, figuring out my brain, figuring out my eyeballs, and figuring out how do I make this system work in the ecosystem that I already have built. So I don't know. That's been a lot of what I've been struggling with lately, and it's been interesting. It's been a little frustrating, but it's one of those things of it's like goes back to the age-old mantra we always say, which is if you buy cool guy stuff and you don't ever use it, you don't know how to use it. I didn't know how to make any of this stuff work until I started like really, sneer at it if you want. Dry fire training doesn't get, I guess, the Instagram likes, but like just putting yourself through those drills over and over and over and teaching your brain how to absorb that information, I think that has value. Mm-hmm. But it has very quickly revealed some limitations I personally have. Now, if I take that head PVS 14 and switch it to my right eye and look through that red dot, I have no problems.
Interesting.
I can look through the red dot, not a problem. Target acquisition's not great because, I mean, you're looking through a piece of glass, so that's like cutting down on the light transmission a little bit. A better red dot would probably help with some of that, but like passive aiming for me, that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Yeah. That's interesting. But I mean, that brought us to a good discussion about height over bore and with a rifle versus a shorter barrel rifle and, stuff like that. So what do you got?
Well, let me throw this slideshow up. So first of all, like this is the optic stack on that rifle that's back there behind me, and that's my hand next to it just for comparison's sake. That's about a 3.5 inch. It's not 3.5 inches above the rail, but it's 3.5 inches from the center line of the optic to the center line of the barrel. Just because that's the data that my ballistic calculator likes. And height over the rail doesn't mean anything to it. It wants to know what's the difference between your optic and where the bullet's coming out of. So like that's what I started with. Let me sidebar real quick to the next slide. So this is what happened when I was running Mantis X Blackbeard, or the Blackbeard X drills under night vision and under full light. I knew it was going to be slower. It wasn't even up for debate. I knew it was going to be slower. It's about a second slower on a 1.5 drill. So, 15 shots, 4 transitions. I'm a second slower. And that is, I'm pretty sure from looking at this data side by side, like I'm 2/10 of a second right out of the gate just acquiring the laser, which seems odd to me because as fast as I can come up and get the red dot on target, I was kind of surprised I was seeing that. And this is like one drill out of a bunch that I ran, but that's consistent. I'm 2/10 of a second slower on the first shot every time, and it's just the extra time it's taken me to find the laser. Which maybe that's because I don't train with lasers very often. I've taught myself to shoot through iron sights, through red dots, through low power variable optics, but I don't shoot with a lot of laser sights. Never have. It's just never been something I've fell into. And the other thing I was noticing was that my transitions from one target to another are a hair slower, but oddly enough, my follow-up shots on the same target are also slower, and I can't explain that. Like, once I've actually gotten the laser on target, I get the first shot, and then when I go for the second or the third or the fourth of follow-up shots, every one of those follow-up shots is usually a little bit slower, and I haven't figured out why yet.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's just a lack of comfort. I don't know if, I don't know. Part of it could very well be something as simple as the fact that like I'm turning my head slower because I now have this extra weight gimbaled off the front of my melon and my neck is craning it back and forth. I don't know. It was an interesting moment where I knew I was going to be slower. I just didn't expect to see slower in these specific areas. And then one of our patrons asked me to run this drill again, and I don't have that slide, but they asked me to run this drill again in failing light with a visible light and no night vision, and I landed right between these two times. So 4.5 seconds with night vision, 4 seconds using a visible weapon light and a red dot, and 3.5 seconds with full light and a red dot, which I attribute purely to the fact that even with the visible light and and like not having night vision, I was able to shoot with both eyes open, but I was also having a little bit more trouble acquiring that red dot because the visible light tended to blow the red dot out.
Hmm.
So, live and learn. It's the only way you're ever going to figure this stuff out is by trying it. Now, as far as our conversation about height over bore, so this is left to right, and for those of you who are listening to this in audio, I will post all this in our Facebook group, and if you're not in our Facebook group, you kind of miss out on stuff like this. But these are the pictures to go with what we're talking about. This is a 25-yard zero with a 3.5, a 2.5, and a 2-inch sight height. Now, I have to take the overlay off so you can see the last little bit of that. Okay. So now, a 3.5-inch sight height is what I have on that rifle back there. It's probably pretty close to what you have too, if I had to just lay a guess. You have, I mean, if you're 1.9 inches plus the height, plus half the height of the optic, plus another, half inch, which is half to 3/4 of an inch, which is going to be the difference between the top of your rail and your barrel center line, we're probably at about the same. So the reason I say 25 yards is that there's a lot of, like I know at my local FUD range, they will not let you stand up on the rifle range. So if you want to stand up and shoot, you're going to do that at the pistol range. That's 25 yards. And I could see a lot of guys building a mostly CQB focused rifle or personal home defense weapon zeroing for 25 yards. Because that's just makes more sense than a 300 yard zero for a gun you're going to use inside of a hallway. But I knew going into this that with that short of a zero, your sight height was going to make an enormous difference in your holdovers past that 0 point. I wasn't expecting it to be this much though. So your highest holdover hold under is 13 inches at about 200 yards with a 3.5-inch sight height. Whereas coming down to a 2.5-inch sight height, which is what the AR-15 traditionally uses. Most of your sights, if they're absolute or 1/3 co-witness, they're about that height. And if you have iron sights, that's the height you're at. But your holdover cuts in half to 6.7 with a 2.5-inch sight height. So coming down 1 inch decreases your hold under out at that distance by half. And then coming down another ½ inch, which is what I measured off of my bolt action with a scope, it comes down to 4.2 inches. So what I'm looking at here is that with this very very with the shorter zero distance, your height over bore turns into it turns into an exponential increase in your hold over hold under, which again there are times when that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, if you're talking about a gun that's mostly for home defense, the odds of you using this silly thing out to 175 to 200 yards is fairly minimal, and that's probably a trade off you're willing to make. But I would encourage a person to do this kind of like go get a free ballistic calculator off of the app store and do this kind of work. Put in your variables as best you know them so that you can at least estimate what that hold over hold under is going to be, and then go out to the range and confirm it. Because knowing how your weapon behaves from 0 to 25 yards is fine, but not knowing how it behaves past 25 yards means you cannot safely and effectively shoot past 25 yards. The other thing this tells us is that with this short of if your only option for zeroing a rifle is a really short distance, be very mindful of the sight height, because if you're shooting center mass, like most self defense experts are going to preach that shoot center mass, and if your hold over hold under is 4 inches from 0 to say 200 yards, you're still going to make a good respectable hit. But if your hold over is or hold under is now 13 inches, you shoot center mass, you could be missing your target. Especially when you throw like 4 MOA ammo into the equation. Now we're talking about you're missing hits because you don't know what your hold over hold under is at those longer ranges. Now, we also talked about, I knew going into this that stretching up the zero distance was going to make this extra little bit of trigonometry, meaning the height over bore. I knew it was going to matter less if you zeroed at longer distances. Like that's how the math works out. I was not expecting what I found though. So this is those same three sight heights at a 300 yard zero, with all the other variables, all the ballistic math being exactly the same, which is modeled roughly after like my normal plinking load. It's a 55 grain Hornady in 5.56. And what I discovered was stretching out that zero distance means that your hold over hold under gets much less, down to about 7.5 inches at the most, which is much more manageable with that high optic stack. But I wasn't expecting it to be higher with the shorter sight height. You see that, right? All the way on the right hand side, 175 yards. That's an 8.1 inch holdover compared to a 7.9 compared to a 7.5. So for whatever reason, I don't know why yet because I haven't graphed all this, but the higher sight height is producing less variance between your sight center line and the ballistic path of the bullet at those longer ranges with a 300 yard zero. Don't know why that is yet, but regardless, the important part here is by 0 to 300 yards, your hold over hold under is much less throughout that range from 0 to 300 yards. So I would encourage a person that if you have the availability to zero your weapon to say 100 yards or 200 or 300, it's probably going to give you a much gentler, more consistent variance between your sight and your ballistic path. But understand, if you go into this and you only have that short 25 yard zero, just understand that every tenth of an inch above the bore that sight is, it's going to have a very drastic, almost an exponential effect on what your hold over hold under is past 25 yards.
Well, I
Which
mean,
again, if we're talking about short range, if we're talking about like a pistol caliber carbine or a handgun, shooting out to 175 yards probably doesn't matter that much.
right, and that's like I said, if you're gonna mount an optic this high, uh, you're not shooting long distances, extremely long distances with it. That's why I think I got mine zero. Mine zero is zeroed for 50 yards, which is a 200 yard out to 200. But I will not be shooting this thing past 200 yards or past 100 yards. Like, it's meant for close range, a shorter barrel. Now I built a AR with a longer barrel to reach out past 100 yards, and then that has a scope and uh, it's a little bit tighter to the rail than 3 inches. So, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this just goes to show that you should just know your rifle, whatever you run, just know your rifle and know the holdovers. Know that at such and such distance, I need to hold an inch high. Know at when I'm up at 3 feet, okay, I pretty much can just aim almost, you know, you actually not dead on because you're going to be, if you're point blank, you're going to be shooting 3 inches low. But if you're at 10 yards, okay, well, what's my holdover? What's my hold under? That, that kind of stuff. So just know that and train with it, and just know your rifles. So,
Yeah. And kind of in that same vein, like one of the things I had to wrap my brain around when I started training with the Blackbeard X more, because the Blackbeard X that I got has the laser, and when I alternated back and forth between training with Laser Academy, so I needed that laser to actually hit a physical target on the wall in order for it to count as a hit, and I was alternating back and forth between that and Blackbeard X. And with Blackbeard X, or with Mantis X for that matter, it's all based off the accelerometers. It's based on how well you pull the trigger. It's based on your transitions, but it's not based on physically how close did the path of the would-be bullet land to the center of the target. Laser Academy does that, however. And what I realized, which I guess, call me a moron for not thinking about ahead of time, but sometimes I miss the forest for the trees. But one thing I noticed immediately was that I had to relearn. And bear in mind, like this is you've slept in this office. Like it's probably what 15 feet across. It's not exactly a
give
big
or take.
office. But shooting at this short of a distance with the zero I had on that rifle, I realized very quickly I had to hold over 2 full inches. And why wouldn't I? Because the red dot is this high up off the scope and it's zeroed for 25 yards. I'm shooting it at 12 feet, and the dot, it was up here, but the laser coming out of the barrel was landing down here. So if I just put the dot on the target and snapped a shot off, I was pulling like sixes and sevens on some of these targets. And I had to rewire my brain to remember at this short of a range, I have to hold over. And it's one of those little quirks that again comes whether you go to the range and you train, or you dry fire train, or you use a training aid. It's another one of those things of I now have it wired into my head. When I look through that red dot, I have got to aim 2 inches higher than where I want the shot to go, which may not sound like that big of an issue. But again, if I ever have to use that gun in anger, it's in a home where my wife and child are, and I kind of want the bullet to go exactly where I want it to go for obvious reasons. And holdover becomes something you have to just build into your brain box. I mean, you have to, by not, if I had never done those drills, I probably wouldn't have thought about it. I'd
And
venture
I
to say
mean,
a lot of AR owners probably don't think about it. What your holdover is at such a short range.
and that's the thing is, before we wrap this side of the show up, the um, it's like the tactics, room clearing, like speed shooting, trying to get that sub-second shot off. All of that looks cool when it comes to Instagram and like when you're trying to show off to your friends and stuff like that. But accuracy is what is going to be like, that's the main thing. So yeah, you can shoot sub-second, you can clear a room like nobody's business. But if you can't place those rounds where they need to be, then that goes out the window. Because if you forget your holdover and you come into a room and you shoot and you forget your holdover and your round either misses or goes under, or you think and you're maybe a little bit further out than you thought and you actually go too high, or you actually hold over and you hold over too much and you go too high and that round flies off and skips off the dude's head and smacks your daughter, or like hits another pedestrian somewhere else. I mean, that all that crap comes into play when you're in a defensive situation. And so you just that's where these holdovers, that's where they come in handy, is knowing, hey, if I have somebody coming in and I'm within 25 yards, or if I'm within 50 yards, even and I put that red dot right on his between his eyes. I know I'm going to hit nasal or I'm going to be hit, hit jugular or something, I know I'm going to hit. And that's where that's where I've read on different instructors and stuff like that, where that's where they say, you know what, if you can aim center mass and you can pop them in and shoot them in center mass, and you aim for their throat and you're like, okay, my holdover, but you aim for their throat or you aim for their clavicle, the area, and you shoot, you're going to hit their lungs, you're going to hit the heart, you're going to, you're going to hit. So
And
just,
that's a go ahead. I thought you were
oh
done.
no, I was just say, I was just saying, like, that's where knowing your holdovers, that's important.
Yeah. Well, and to answer Joe's question, like an AR-10 0 to 50. See, you have two things going on here. First of all, is that AR-10 and 308, you're dealing with almost certainly a more ballistically efficient projectile than a 55 grain 55, 55 grain 223 bullet is, which I don't recall off the top of my head. I've got it someplace in my reloading trash, but 55 grain 556 bullets are not the most ballistically efficient things on earth. They come out of the barrel screaming fast, and that's about the best thing they have going for them. 308 tends to be usually a bit slower, not a lot, but a little bit, but it also tends to be a much longer, more ballistically efficient round, so it's not going to drift as much, and it's not going to lose velocity as quickly. So like the best thing I can tell you to give you a completely not yes or no answer is the best thing you could do is to get a ballistic calculator, get one out of the App Store, get one out of the Google App Store, Google it, find one online. I mean, there are ballistic calculators out there. They're not hard to use, and they're very abundant. And punch in the information for your weapon. You will need to know the ballistic coefficient of the bullet you're using, and if you have trouble figuring that out, reach out to me on Facebook, and I promise you, if you tell me what ammunition you use, I can probably find it. You'll need to know the muzzle velocity, which you're going to have to estimate unless you have a chronograph handy. You're going to need to know like your height over bore. You're going to need to know some information. It's going to be a little legwork, but you can plug that in, and then very similar to what I just showed on the screen, it will tell you how high above your aim point or below your aim point you will be for that whole range of distances. And then the best thing I can tell you at that point is you can either A, stick with that 50 yard zero and know what your hold under is and train to that, or you could change that one variable in whatever you're using and change that zero distance and see, is a 50 yard zero really the thing that works the best for me, or would a longer zero distance give me less variance so I don't really have to worry about the holdover? But I can't answer that question without a ton of information.
Well, the way I'd answer that question is what's your longest distance shooting? I mean, here in Michigan, I won't be shooting unless I'm out in a field somewhere. Even then, I mean, I won't be shooting much further than 200 yards. So my rifle, my 308, it's zeroed for 50 yard out to 200. Confirmed at 200. If I my 6.5 Creedmoor, it's 200 yards. Now there's a couple places I finally found a range that it's 300 yards, and I'd like to stretch it out further. But in Michigan, I don't need it out. I don't need to go out that far. And that's the thing is, I guess, what is your purpose for the AR-10? And if you're using it for hunting, what's your distance? I mean, if you're shooting 400 or 500 yards, then yeah, you probably need to. You might have to move that back. You have to check some stuff. I could definitely get into some ballistic calculators and stuff like that. But yeah, it all depends on your max distance, really. Because in Michigan, I'm not gonna sit there and zero for 500, 600 yards when I'm not gonna be shooting that far. No fact.
The other thing I encourage people to do, because like this is what I did with the reticle on my 308, and I still have this card in that safe someplace. It fell off the rifle, it drifted down to the bottom, but it's in there. But I literally made a graphical representation of my scope reticle, and I have the little bullet drop compensator dots in there, but they mean nothing to me until what I did was I looked up what the difference in those dots was in literally in inches. It took some doing, but like I found that information and I made basically a copy of the reticle and I labeled those BDCs for
Mhm.
distance. So back when I was training with that rifle a lot and shooting it a lot, and I was doing load development and I was really trying to like, see how accurate could I shoot at 100 yards, and making four 308s touch at 100 yards is a lot of fun. If nobody's ever done it, I encourage you to try it. It's like golfing for gun guys. It's very meditational, very zen. But I made a copy of that reticle where I labeled that scope. So I knew at this range that I needed to use this dot, and this dot was this range, and this dot was this range. And then it's a little known in the civilian world, it's a little known in the military, it's actually pretty common, but like there are rough approximations for the width of an adult male, like the width of their shoulders.
Mhm.
And you can equate it, depending on if you have any lateral markings in your reticle, you can do the math. It's possible. It's a little tricky, but you can do the math to figure out like the distance between here and here in my reticle at max zoom. You have to do all this at max zoom. Don't try to figure it out at anything but max zoom. It'll drive you crazy. But the distance between here and here, if the shoulders take up this much room, that person is at approximately this distance. And if they take up half of this, they're approximately this distance. So now I can use everything in that reticle to approximately distance somebody based on how much between here and here their shoulders take up. And then as soon as I have that approximate distance, I have my bullet drop right here. So
Yeah,
like
you made a dope card is what you did.
that's exactly what I did.
Exactly
Now
what it is. Yeah.
it,
So
it's one, and again, the whole conversation started off by saying nerdy gun stuff. It's a lot of trigonometry, it's a lot of geometry, it's a lot of math, it's a lot of nerd stuff. But if you want to talk about something that like almost every special forces sniper in the world does, they have a dope card. They
mhm.
know how to look at the world through that reticle and very quickly do an approximate range and do their holdover hold unders very quickly. They train to that reticle and they know what that reticle, they know the information that reticle relays to their eyeball. So like if your concern is shooting for distance, I encourage you to try to figure that out for your weapon system. And if your concern is like CQB, then I encourage you to train to that. But whatever you're anticipating using your weapon for, just understand that there's X amount of prep work, X amount of math, X amount of training, X amount of just trying this stuff out, because like all the cool guy Instagram gear in the world will not help you one tiny little bit if you can't make your brain hand interface make it work. And that's what I've been pushing myself on a lot recently. Like I'd really gotten away from a lot of this for a long time. I got really focused, which isn't, I don't think, a bad thing. Like I got really focused on like other areas of prepping. I got focused on food. I got focused on finances. I got focused on a lot of other things, and I am now turned back onto. I need to really dig back into the firearm side of this and start pushing myself.
Mhm.
So
That actually ties into our next topic kind of well. Uh, Mutual assistance groups or MAG groups. And a mutual assistance group is kind of like what Phil has, in a way, alluded on. Is it's a group of people that you align with, that you have same values, same views, pretty much. A group of people that you rely on, that you guys come together in hard times. And it can be now, it can be crap hits the fan and doomsday's having it, and you guys band together. But having a guy that knows reloading, having a guy that knows dope, having a guy knows how to shoot, having a guy that knows kind of like what Phil just went over, like that's somebody that would be good in a mag in a mutual assistance group. And I know we haven't really discussed it too much. It's been a while since we've touched on it. But you know, this is where in times like this is where these groups come into are beneficial, especially if you and I go back to church. I mean, you go to church, especially a small church. You meet a butcher, you meet a farmer, you meet somebody who has, they have 30, 40, 50 chickens and they got eggs and all this other stuff. Like and then okay, because now you can be more self-reliant, and you don't have to be as reliant on the government. You don't have to be as reliant. You know, you're seeing all this crap going on in the news where we just had, what was it, in Florida? There was a an apple orchard or something that caught fire. I mean, there's video coming out of them pushing over literally hundreds of thousands of eggs because something like just COVID or whatever reason, they're saying that they have to dispose of them. Chicken coops, so like industrial sized chicken coops, like that supply eggs to the nation, multiple have caught on fire. We've got cattle farmers that have like their barns have caught on fire, all this crap that's going on. Now, this is affecting stuff nationwide, but if you can sit there and you can get this group of people together and you guys can come up with a good game plan, I haven't bought store eggs in a long time. Fortunately, there's a couple guys I work with that they have eggs. They have access to duck eggs. They have access to chicken eggs, and I've been buying chicken and duck eggs from them for, I mean, a while now. And so the whole scare of, hey, the only scare that I have is, hey, I need a dozen eggs, and then they're like, oh well, there's three people ahead of you, get in line, kind of thing. When they only have so many, I understand that, but that's why I try to keep at least 3 dozen in the fridge, and when I get down to a dozen, I find out, hey, what's the wait time, and either I wait for to get down to a dozen, or I put in an order for another 3 dozen. Like, and it's not that hard, especially now farmers. You know, you guys got to, if you know a farmer that they're selling cattle, or they're willing to part with a cow, find out how much and what you got to do to part with them. Contact a local butcher, find out what you got to do to maybe get the meat processed, how much it's going to cost, and stuff like that. It's very doable in today's world. In today's, I mean, we're linked together by these here and the interwebs. We're very linked together. So use that to our benefit now and prep for what's coming, because it's only going to get worse. And, just if you can, yeah, I understand we all still have to go to the stores for certain things, but if you can sit there and be like, well, yeah, sure, my neighbor across from me is panicking because they can't find eggs. Well, I don't have that issue. Or, hey, I have a source of beef, or or pigs. Like, I I don't have that issue. That's one less thing that you have to worry about,
Well,
and
and
one
the
less
other
thing
thing,
your family has to worry about.
I would encourage a person, like if you're looking at, let's even say it's not something as formal as a mag. Let's just say I like to have friends who know stuff that I don't, so that we
Mhm.
can advise each other. Like I made the comment in our little friend chat, Andrew, earlier today, and I doubt you saw it because I know you were working. But I made the comment. I'm like, this group is like having 30 older brothers and a couple older sisters. Because like, if I have a question about I don't know, anything to do with electrician work, I've got people in there that know what they're doing, can advise me, or they can say, don't kill yourself, go hire a professional. If we have plumbing questions, construction questions, if we have questions about guns, questions about solar, questions about battery technology, there are people in this big circle of friends that I wish lived closer to me, but unfortunately you SOBs won't move to Louisiana, so I'm just gonna have to take what I can get. But like, there are people in there that know something about almost everything. And that's the kind of network everybody needs to build. Even if you can't have those people all in your backyard where they can provide you physical aid in a time of need, if they can do nothing except be on call to advise you, to share knowledge, to do a knowledge transfer, that is invaluable in this time. And the other thing I would say is like, broaden your horizons. I am a 6 foot tall, 250-pound combat vet. I like to sew. I suck at it. Nothing I sew y'all will ever want to wear. It looks like a meth head, stabbed a needle through it 16 times. But like when I got this PVS 14, I pretty quickly decided, I'm like, I kind of want a lanyard that'll Velcro to the side of the helmet just in case it pops off the mount. But I don't like the idea of spending $30 on one. And I had a whole roll of nylon webbing and Velcro and 550 cord. I've got all the stuff I need to make one. So I just sat here at my desk and sewed one up. One of those funny little things you can do when you know how to make stuff from other stuff. You're not tied up having to bow to the will of rampant consumerism and spend money on the interwebs when you have the stuff in your house and you can just cobble stuff together. Like, I joke that I dread bringing my wife and daughter to Hobby Lobby because those two could spend a C note like that in that place. But I joke about that because I can too. Like, you let me loose in the fabric section, you let me loose over by the sewing supplies or over by the Velcro, the shock cord, the elastic webbing. You let me loose by any of that stuff, and I start thinking about stuff I can make. I made a thigh strap for my war belt for my holster because I was having a little bit of an issue with the holster, like flexing up away from my thigh on the drawstroke. So I made my own thigh strap. I had 1 inch buckles. I had nylon webbing. Why not? Why not just make it myself? It's those kinds of things, like having people in your life that can push you to develop skill sets you don't have. And very often, we don't need somebody to like hold our hand and do it for us. We just need a little bit of encouragement and maybe some tricks of the trade. So, like, I totally agree with you. Having a mag, but just having a big friend group that knows stuff you don't is invaluable. Even if you're not a prepper, if you're just an adult.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing is with the group that we have put together as far as like the Patreon group and stuff and the chat. I mean, even not even the Patreon group, but there's also we have another a group chat that is just a bunch of other preppers and stuff like that, just like-minded individuals. But basically there it's a digital mutual assistance group. Like it's a digital form of what we should have in our physical form, and and it's more important physically to have those kind of people around you than it is the digital side, just because of if things were to happen and we lose power or something happened and you don't have access to that group, well, now you're SOL and you're on your own again. That's why it's important to reach out and find these people that are like minded, and they know different areas. I mean, I know right now if I have electrical issues, I know people I can call. I might have to persuade them with a case of beer or money, but they're gonna possibly charge me a lot less than if I call somebody like an actual electrician and have to go through a whole contractor and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean that's the thing is getting these people that are like-minded, you can trust, and just being able to bounce ideas off them, being able to learn from them, being able to, hey, you do this for me and I'll do this, like help them out, help each other out, and that's what, and a mag. It doesn't have to be crap hits the fan situation at all. It can be just, hey, I have a group of friends, and this guy knows guns, this guy's an electrician, this guy's a plumber, this guy's a mechanic, and we help each other out. And I mean, I know some of my friends, I know they can call me and they'll say, hey, I need help doing this, and I'll make the time and I'll come over and help them. And they're the same guy that I can call and say, hey, I'm having issues with my Jeep, and I bring a case of beer over, and not only will he help me with my Jeep, but he will also he will show me. I'll get in there, and he likes it when I get in on it and wrench with him because I'm learning. And then plus it's just fun because now we're hanging out and BSing and drinking more beer than getting work done. But at the same time, that's what makes it fun. But get that stuff done now. Learn who these people are now and get to know them and make them part of your group. Like, it's not going to hurt anything really. If anything, it's going to help. Especially today's society, today's world, like having that group of friends. And now, as I've gotten older, um, I mean, when I was younger, it was more of like, hey, I need all the friends in the world. Like, how big can I make my friends list? Now, as I've gotten older, it's been who can help me and who can I help, and I kind of base it off of that. And it's and honestly, like, I haven't really thrown this out there too much, but been kind of getting myself back in the dating world. It's kind of, and I've gotten on some dating apps, and it's kind of the same thing. I'll look through and, hey, who's this? What's their job? What are they doing? If they're a engineer, okay, cool. If they're a nurse, cool. If they're something other than, if they're saying, oh, I run a nonprofit, I'm sorry, I'm swiping. Like I'm swiping left. I'm not swiping right on somebody who's running a nonprofit. I need skills, valuable skills. So maybe I'm looking at it all wrong, but that's how I'm looking at it right now.
Well, I mean, and I would say, regardless of what kind of relationship we are talking about maintaining, whether it is, prospective dating all the way to just friends and acquaintances, like, I do try to surround myself with people, and it doesn't have to be people that think the way I do, but it has to be people with some of the same worldview. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a group of friends that I can bounce stuff off of, and we can disagree passionately but respectfully. And that's what I look for more than anything. I can't stand those people. I don't want to be. I don't want to be surrounded by people where I have to agree with them to stay their friend, and I don't want to be around people that can't like respect me as an individual while disagreeing with my opinion. And then right behind that, I place a ton of value on people who push me to do better. Like, I don't have a ton of friends in my normal daily life. And the few that I do call friends, they're people who push me. They're people who, like, I look at them as, like, as husband, as father, as just handling their business, pushing their career, whatever, saving money for retirement, whatever they're doing. And I think to myself, I better step my game up because they're making me look like I'm sitting on my butt. Like, that's what I look for. I look for the people who are doing what they're supposed to be doing with their lives and they're pushing because it makes me want to push. Yeah. And when you're around people who are just sitting around drinking beer and staring at the ceiling doing nothing, it makes you kind of want to do that too. And I don't want to waste my life sitting around doing nothing. I've got way too much stuff to take care of between now and the day I meet I go to meet Jesus. So like those are the things that's important to me. And with regards to surrounding yourself with that group of people that can help you out with daily emergencies or really, really big emergencies, I would say look for the people who know the stuff you don't. Like, it's cool to have a big group of gun guys where you can all sit around and BS about guns all the time. That's fun. But if you got 100 guys that all know guns and not a one of y'all knows how to put a tourniquet on or stitch up a rip in a piece of clothing or work on a car or do electrical work, y'all are a one-trick pony. Y'all aren't going to make it very far. Right. Everybody's got to bring stuff to the table. Hopefully that the other people in the group don't. That's what you really want. And if you don't have at least one farmer and one nurse in that group, you need to keep looking. Just putting that out there. I'm not the farmer in my group. I kill anything that's green and grows. I can murder it.
Yeah, I got a black thumb.
Yeah. I wish I could grow stuff. I've tried. I just fail at it spectacularly.
But that's all we got, though. I mean, I'm kind of curious to hear what other people think. So as always, chime in. But what are your thoughts?
And tomorrow's Memorial Day, so I'm not going to do what a lot of people do and say Happy Memorial Day, because I know what Memorial Day is for, and it's kind of a very serious, somber moment for a lot of people. So I will just say, please treat Memorial Day as what it is meant to be. It's a memorial. And if you have brothers or sisters who served who might be having trouble tomorrow, please tap them on the shoulder for me and make sure they're doing okay. Matter of Fact's podcast heading out the door. Talk to y'all later, guys.
See ya.